Hello and welcome to the Church Close podcast. I'm your host, Philip Heimbaugh. Let's get into it here today. This is the very first episode, everyone, the inaugural episode of, for what now is being called the Church Close podcast. As we talk more today, maybe that name will become a little bit more apparent to you as to why I chose it. But I just wanted to kind of provide a little bit of an introduction to myself in this first episode, and a little bit of a background into who I am, my theological background, and kind of where I stand now. And also an introduction as to what I hope that this podcast will turn into. I'm a person who's felt called to ministry for probably about half my life now. And I'm a Lutheran. I am part of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. And I have a strong desire to serve in that ministry, but they are pretty strict with their residential seminary requirements. So it just has not been something that I've been able to do. And as I've felt more and more called to do something, I thought, well, I tend to be a bit of a Luddite. I don't love technology. I'm not someone who goes crazy for it. I tend to long for the days of analog, if I'm being perfectly honest. But I thought, why not use modern technology to my advantage and at least get my voice out there, get some of my ideas out there. Even if I can't say this is in a ministerial capacity, it's at least something that I enjoy talking about, and maybe others will too. So, again, my name is Philip Heimbaugh, and this is the first episode of the Church Close podcast. A little bit about me. I am 41 years old. I was raised in the General Association of Regular Baptist Churches, the GARBC. I've never met anyone else who attended a GARBC church or knew what one was. I think we were classified as quote-unquote regular Baptists, although I can't say that for sure. I don't know. I don't know really anything about the church polity. I think it was pretty much congregationalism, where everyone just kind of did their own thing. But we were a pretty legalistic congregation, unfortunately, and I'll try to remember to touch on that term a little bit later. I don't really like that term. I think a lot of times legalism is used as an excuse to do whatever the heck we want to. But this church actually was pretty legalistic. I won't name it, of course. I'll try to keep names, locations pretty vague. I don't want to unintentionally violate someone's privacy or compromise it in any way by talking about details. And again, some of these things that I'll talk about just in my history, I am not a first-hand witness. This is all hearsay from people who are privy to the details of what actually happened. So don't worry. Not every episode is going to be me talking about myself. That would be really boring for all of you, and I don't want that to be the case. So we're going to talk Lutheran theology. We're going to talk apologetics and exegesis and all these types of things. I am not going to pretend to be an expert in any of them. In fact, I'm not an expert in any of them. I'm never going to claim to be the smartest guy in the room. I know a fair bit. I like to read my Bible, but mostly I really love to discuss ideas with people. That's one of the things I enjoy most. I'm a pretty traditional guy, so I have some pretty not culture-friendly ideas and opinions about things that a lot of people disagree with. And you'll hear one of those today probably as we talk about our topic of the day, which is Church Close, hence the name Church Close Podcast. I want to make it really, really clear, though, before we actually dive into Church Close, the episode is going to really emphasize attitude, intention, and reverence. Okay, attitude, intention, and reverence. Not really the enforcement of some dress code just for its own sake or making people feel badly about what they're wearing. That's not my point at all when we jump into Church Close. So don't get upset and turn off the episode quite yet. There is some nuance to the discussion, and I really hope that you enjoy it. But first, a little bit of my background, just so you kind of understand where I'm coming from. Okay, so I've actually been putting this off for a really long time. I've wanted to do kind of a podcast or a YouTube channel for a while, but truth be told, 10 years ago, I did not have the stomach for comment sections or for people disagreeing with me. I didn't know how to handle it, and it was probably because I wasn't very smart, I wasn't very well read, and I didn't really understand how to argue logically. And now I understand those things a little bit better, and so it's easier for me to read someone's comment and say, well, they're not even really making an argument. They're just, spouting off, and people who maybe have really good points. And I can say, oh, wow, they have a great argument here. Let me see how it conflicts with mine and how it jives with mine and what that means. So that would be definitely a goal of this podcast as well. So that's why I'm going to give you a little bit of my background. I was a kid of very little faith. And I say that only because I was so unconvinced of my own salvation. I accepted Christ as my Lord and Savior at the age of probably 5 or 6. And I'm the father of a 4.5-year-old son now. And he has faith. Don't get me wrong. He was baptized at 2 months old. He's got faith. He knows Jesus. He loves Jesus. He knows that Jesus died on the cross. I don't know that he can fully comprehend at his age of 4.5, the sinful nature of man, the universal access to grace that Christ provides, that all are called, to be his followers, that he died for everyone, if only they'll come to a saving knowledge of who he is and what he did. So he knows that. But I don't know that he knows it to a level where he really knows it, if that makes sense. We're working on it big time, and nothing will make me happier than the day when he makes a real genuine proclamation of his faith. But I did that quite young, and he's getting to about that age, so I'm very, very excited about that for him. And the reason I say I was a kid of little faith is because I was so anxious and so worried about hell and about punishment. And there's a whole bunch that goes into that with my upbringing and so forth. But there's a whole lot that went into that for me as a kid, where I would continually pray, Lord, please help this to be real. Please let me be saved. I really mean it. I really mean it. And so in that way, I wasn't showing very great faith, but I was also very, very young. That was 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. And of course, as I've grown and matured, I'm a little more comfortable expressing my convictions and my faith and explaining what it is I believe and why I believe it and things like that. And again, just have had a really profound desire to start engaging with other believers thoughtfully rather than combatively. The podcast is really, again, going to be focused on Lutheran theology, some Christian apologetics, again, mostly through the Lutheran lens, because that's what I know, or my Baptist upbringing, because that's what I know. Church life and culture. I'm a big culture guy. I wouldn't call myself a quote-unquote culture warrior. I think that's kind of a label that doesn't really help anyone these days, but I do not like the direction of the dominant culture of our society, and I have a lot of opinions about it. And then learning alongside audience, hopefully. I really hope that I will become a better speaker, a better podcaster, a better Christian, a better apologist, all those things through engagement with the audience. So, never claiming to be the smartest person in the room, I still have a great deal to learn. I like to say I have just about everything to learn. So, let's jump into my background here. General Association of Regular Baptists. I learned the gospel. I got quote-unquote saved. I learned to take church seriously. I learned that it wasn't a place where you go to goof around or be silly in service. There were programs for that. We had VBS and children's church and all those sorts of things. But my family was really, really heavily involved with the church. So through my lens as a kid, I always felt that it was a very loving, welcoming, and accepting place. Everyone knew and loved my family. I had great experiences there growing up. I had a lot of friends there. I really enjoyed my time. And unfortunately, as I got older, my family went through a transition that, in the church was a big no-no. My parents got divorced. Dun, dun, dun. Which, not to make light of it, it really was terrible. I was about 16 when it all happened. And suddenly, all these friendly church people that I'd known my whole life who were, really wonderful friends, it seemed, to my family, suddenly became enemies almost overnight. enemies either of my mom or my dad, or maybe they ran afoul of my siblings or of myself. And everywhere I looked, that whole church support system was just crumbling all around me. So a great upbringing insofar as I got the gospel, I got the foundations of a really, really great Christian life, and I began my Christian walk, and I've stumbled. Please understand, this is in no way, shape, or form a moral high ground podcast. I would never, ever claim that. If there's a step that can be taken that is a bad step or a mistake that can be made, I've probably made that mistake in my Christian walk. So I'm no better, no worse than anybody else. We're all sinners in need of salvation. But I do have a lot of opinions about the culture, as I said, and I would love to be able to share those with y'all. So went through church being in that Baptist environment. After I turned 18, I started going to another church with my mom and new stepfather. I never really liked it. Come to find out, it was not a great place. Again, I don't know all the details, but suffice it to say, I had someone I knew who ended up working there, and they just reported some pretty terrible treatment. So I said, you know what, this is not for me, and I left. And at that time, I basically said, I'm done. I'm not messing around with this church thing anymore. It's not for me. It's full of hypocrites, right? We've all heard that one. And I decided I was going to be done. And it wasn't until I met and started dating my wife and we really started seriously thinking about getting married that I said, well, I probably need to start thinking about making church attendance a priority for us as a couple. And all I really knew was being Baptist, and I didn't really want to go back down that road. And unfortunately, I was raised in the church to really believe that Roman Catholic brothers and sisters were cultists. I mean, they spoke very, very unflatteringly about Roman Catholics. I now, of course, believe that our Roman Catholics are brothers and sisters in Christ. I do think some of their practices are misguided, but they probably think some of mine are. So we can agree to disagree on those things. But so in my mind at the time, Roman Catholicism was not an option, and I didn't really know anything in between. I knew there were other things, but I basically knew Baptist and Catholic. And my wife just happened to say, well, you know, I was baptized Lutheran when I was a baby, and for a brief time we attended church when I was a kid. And so I said, well, hey, that's a great place to start. And so we ended up, at the time, we had moved out of our home state of Michigan to Colorado, where my wife was going to be going to graduate school. And that ended up not working out. We were only there a year, but while we were there for a year, we got involved with a really wonderful church that just so happened to be part of the ELCA, the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. Now, you're all probably wondering, if you're listening to this, Philip, I thought you said you were a pretty traditional guy. Why on earth are you going to an ELCA church? Well, that I didn't know. I didn't know any better. Believe it or not, this was still in I won't say the early days of the internet, but every place having a website just chock full of relevant information wasn't as ubiquitous as it is now. And, you know, in my early 20s, I wasn't really super diligent about doing the research necessary to make a good informed decision. We just found Lutheran, and it was close by to where we lived, so we went there. Thankfully, we ended up having an absolutely tremendous experience. The pastor was a wonderful man who was really kind to two 21-year-olds who were not married, living together, trying to do this graduate school thing, failing pretty miserably at life. We were having relationship crises and all sorts of different stuff. And the pastor of this church was so wonderful, so kind, charitable, and loving, but never let us off the hook. In fact, he used those hardships to get us more involved with the church, and we really, really loved it there. Now, we didn't understand at the time the, theological and social liberalism that had taken hold of the ELCA. And so when we ended up going back home after about a year, in Colorado, we tried our local ELCA church, and actually the problem we ran into wasn't that it was super liberal, it was that it was dead. And I'm really not trying to be mean, but there was just no life in that church. We went for a service, and we came out feeling just kind of like, ugh, that was rough, you know. And so we ended up finding a really wonderful church a town over in the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. And this is when we really started to make the distinction between ELCA and LCMS. And I fell in love with the LCMS and with this church. And we started a really wonderful relationship with that church for a couple of years. And then my wife got a doctoral program offer in another state. And we attended a church, ELCA church out of state for a brief time as well. So needless to say, we have been LCMS, Lutheran Church Missouri Synod Lutherans for the past, 20 years or so. During that time, that entire time, I have really felt called to ministry. I never was able to do it simply because, the Concordia seminaries are residential in St. Louis, Missouri, and Fort Wayne, Indiana, and neither of those places worked for us at any time in our life together. And still don't, unfortunately. I love the LCMS, and I really wish there were some more pathways forward for men like me who wish to serve. But in any case, I want this to maybe be my version of that. You know, I'm hoping that this will be kind of my way of not necessarily having a ministry, but maybe having a way to at least have my voice heard a little bit and engage with an audience about some of these topics. So I know sometimes, looking at things through our teenage lens can skew them a little bit, as I did with my Baptist church upbringing, but the experience really did genuinely affect me. I really felt like my church family had abandoned me. And so here we are, Lutheran now, and it's been wonderful. And I have a lot of opinions, and just issues I'd really love to talk about. And one of those is God doesn't care what I wear to church. I think we've all heard that before, right? God doesn't care what I wear to church. I can wear shorts and a t-shirt. I can wear the sweats that I slept in. It doesn't matter. God doesn't care. It's legalistic. It's legalistic to care what someone wears to church. And I disagree. Church clothing, I think, really is important. I think a lot of people think it's petty. And I want to make it really clear what I'm not arguing for. First of all, I'm not saying that God requires designer labels, right? To spend a fortune on clothing. I am not advocating for that. Expensive clothing is not somehow more holy, right? I'm not making that claim either, right? A suit doesn't make someone a better Christian than someone who's not wearing a suit, right? Visitors and people with limited means should never, ever be made to feel unwelcome. We would never comment openly on someone's clothing, especially a visitor. That's uncharitable and unkind. However, I think we as believers need to do a better job of modeling what it looks like to give our best to God in worship. This has nothing to do with salvation. Salvation is entirely by God's grace through faith in Jesus Christ alone, not through clothing, not through works, not through any of that. I'm not making that argument. What I am making the argument for is that Sunday worship should be set apart. It's a special occasion. We're called in Scripture to be set apart from the world. We'll get into modern worship music, so-called quote-unquote modern worship music, one of these other episodes. That's another thing that I really don't care for, but today is church close. Sunday worship should be special, should be set apart, should be a special occasion. If you were going to a funeral, I'm guessing you would probably put on a suit, a skirt, a dress, whatever it might be, right? Something that you felt was respectful to the person who had died and respectful to the family, that showed reverence, that showed kindness, that showed that you cared. I'm sure to a wedding, unless it's, a destination Bahama wedding or something, there's exceptions to every rule. You'd probably wear a tux if you're in the bridal party, or a dress if you're one of the bridesmaids, right? At the very least, you'd probably put on a shirt with a collar and a nice pair of pants, right? Right? Am I that out of touch that people don't do that anymore? I don't think that I am. How about a job interview? I think most people probably try to look their best for a job interview, right? It's when they break out the special perfume or cologne, they wear their lucky tie, the expensive jacket that they bought for special occasions. What would you wear if you were taking photos of yourself? Either professional or glamour shots or whatever it might be. What about when you were taking photos of yourself? What if you hired somebody to take professional photos of you? I imagine you would go to great lengths to make sure that you were presenting yourself in the best possible light, that you were giving your best to that photographer to do his or her job to the best of their ability, to give you the best product, right? I think so, right? I think so. So why won't we do that for God? Why have we all of a sudden decided that we know the mind of God so thoroughly that we can declare that, well, he doesn't care about what I wear? I'm not going to make the opposite argument. I don't want to fall into that trap, but I am willing to say I don't know if God cares what I wear to church. But I do think that God cares about my attitude when I'm coming to worship him, and I think that's biblical. I do think he wants me to come before him with an open heart and an open mind and spirit, ready to give my worship and my praise, to love him with my whole heart, mind, soul, and strength. I think I'm commanded to do that, right? Aren't we all commanded to do that? Rhetorical question, yes, we are all commanded to do that. So is the practice of dressing nicely necessarily biblical? No, I don't think it is. I know Exodus 28, I think it's Exodus 28, talks about pastoral attire. But I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on the Old Testament law. I don't know if that's ceremonial or ritual or moral. I don't know how that applies to us today or if that applies to us at all. And maybe your best is a clean pair of jeans and a t-shirt. And if it is, fine, it's great. Wear it and look the best that you can. Clean yourself. Practice good hygiene. And show up put together, ready to give the best of what you have to offer to God. Now again, I'm not saying jewelry and diamonds and expensive things. I think it's made pretty clear in Scripture that we're supposed to not really focus on that sort of thing. But I think it has to do with an inward attitude being expressed outwardly. An inward attitude being expressed outwardly. The things that we take seriously, the things that we really believe and have importance in our lives, we give our best to. And we've stopped doing that with church. We've stopped doing that with God. And I think we're hiding behind the excuse of he doesn't care. I think that's an error. I really do. Once again, everyone, if your best is a suit and tie, fantastic. You're going to look great. If your best is slacks and a polo, fantastic. You're going to look great. But please, bring your best. Bring the spirit of worship and reverence. The standard shouldn't be whether or not someone's best looks like my best. The question is whether or not we're approaching worship thoughtfully and reverently. And I think that our outward dress reflects whether or not we're doing that. What do you all think? I think society has been increasingly casualized. We now wear our most casual attire almost everywhere. Let's be honest, a lot of it is indecent. I'm just not willing to say that let's stop dressing in our Sunday best. So some pushback I might get. God doesn't care. 1 Samuel 16:7, man looks at outward appearance, the Lord looks at the heart. Of course. I affirm Scripture. But I would say, if our heart is really where it needs to be, we're not going to roll out of bed, drag a comb through our hair, and show up in church in our sweats. James 2:1-4. Don't favor the well-dressed person over the poor. I agree again. My point is, the welcoming nature of the church, the Christian love that we show to visitors, that does not apply here. If someone comes in off the street and they're dirty, they smell bad, or they've never been there before, we are going to treat them with love and kindness and dignity and respect. Absolutely. And we are going to meet them where they are spiritually, and we're going to try to care for their needs spiritually and physically if we can do so. But I don't think that means they have to walk into a church filled with people who are wearing wrinkly t-shirts, ratty old jeans, and sweatpants. I think they'll walk in and say, wow, these folks look great. These people really have it together. I want to be like them. Or maybe at the very least, they'll say, wow, these people are so nice to me. They won't even notice what we're wearing. But eventually, it'll catch on. The culture didn't get the way it is now overnight. It did not get the way it is now overnight. It took time. It took all of us just saying a little bit at a time, well, we don't really have to care about that, right? We don't really have to care about this. But I'd really love to say is that I believe clothing matters when it comes to our hearts, bringing our best before God. We can express respect, modesty, reverence, love through our clothing, through the way we choose to adorn ourselves and care for ourselves. Bodily actions and adornment can communicate inward attitudes. I really think if someone were to wear a shirt with a pentacle on it, people would at least have questions, as well they should, right? That's not appropriate for the setting. Not appropriate to the setting at all. We should worship God with reverence and awe. Hebrews 12:28-29. Romans 12:1 is an interesting one, presenting our bodies as a sacrifice. How would we want our sacrifice to God to look and to appear before Him? I would want mine to look really, really nice. If I'm giving it to the Almighty Creator of the universe, I want my offering to Him to look really, really good. So let me just kind of break down for a little bit these two opposing approaches here. I am not advocating legalism, which says we're going to treat a Brooks Brothers suit and tie as a divine command from above, or that we're gonna say someone isn't a true believer because they wore a Tweety Bird shirt to Sunday school, or that we're gonna make folks who genuinely and literally cannot afford nice clothing, or visitors who don't know any better, we're not going to make them feel bad or inferior. We're not even going to mention what they're wearing. We're going to love them and care for them as we're commanded to do. But we don't want to fall into the trap of carelessness. And this isn't about personal preference for me. This is about self-discipline for the believer. Our society has become so unserious, so informal. I guess there's no other word for it. And I really think we're missing something there. I really, really do. Can you imagine walking into church on Sunday morning and seeing everyone there looking their absolute best? I think that'd be an amazing thing. Not because I want to see it, but because I would love to be in a church where people are so filled with love and reverence for God that they can't help but want to look their absolute best when they're going to meet and worship with Him. That's my take. What do y'all think? Does it matter? Does it matter at all what we wear to church? I think it does. I'm a shirt and tie kind of guy. I try really hard not to look down on those who are not. But I'll be really honest, guys. It's a little bit, maybe this is selfish, a little bit of a stumbling block for me when I see someone in church who looks like they're on a Hawaiian vacation, or whose clothing is ratty, or unfortunately smells bad, or is dirty. It's hard not to see that for me. And sometimes I get a little frustrated when the response is, well, you just need to calm down. It's not hurting you. Why do I have to calm down my standard? I really don't like the argument of, well, it's not hurting you. Again, I'm going down so many rabbit holes here. My goodness gracious. I want you guys to have fun listening to this. I really am a fun person. I'm really hoping this will be a fun podcast in a lot of ways. I've had machinations in the past of becoming a voice actor, but just have not been able to find the opportunity. But I love to do different voices and be silly. So hopefully you'll see some of that as we go through the podcast here. But church close, formality, tell me what you think. I'd love to hear. Thanks so much for joining me. Episode 1 of the Church Close podcast. Hopefully that name will stick. If it doesn't, who knows? We'll pick a different one. We can pick any name that we want, because this is our podcast. It belongs to us. And when I say us, I guess I mean me and you, right? Myself and the audience. That's kind of why this all exists. So there's a lot to say on the topic, but for now, with episode number 1, I'm going to let it stand right here, everybody. Thanks again for joining me. Philip Heimbaugh, Church Close Podcast. Remember, always look your best.